Your chronic tension, your unexplained pain, your tight hips, your clenched jaw, what if none of that is actually a problem with your physical body? It's a story that your body has been telling for years, maybe decades, and it's just that nobody has taught you how to interpret that story and how to learn from it. This video is going to sound like it's about the physical mechanics of your body, but what it's really about is what happens to not only a woman's body, but her psyche and her nervous system when she's been conditioned to take up less space, to need less, to not have a voice, to shrink. What happens to a body that is taught it's not safe for it to exist as it is? And I think this is the missing key for so many women who are experiencing chronic pain and chronic symptoms, because a great PT can teach you about body mechanics. A great massage therapist or body worker can teach you about muscular tension or even connective tissue and fascia. And a therapist can help you understand the mental and cognitive patterns of what you're going through in your life or even in your childhood. But what I want to talk about is why so many of these patterns cluster in so many of the same places in our body for women, and what you can specifically do about them to change your experience of being in your body. Because your body is not just some robotic mechanical structure, it is the living expression of everything that you were taught you were allowed and were not allowed to be, who you were taught you had to be in order to belong, in order to get love, what was acceptable and what wasn't. All of those narratives became internalized, not just by your psyche, but your body, and your body has been expressing them ever since. And before we go any further, if you're new here, hi, my name is Megan. I'm a somatic therapist, feminine embodiment teacher, author, and guide, and I pretty much spend my whole life helping women figure out who they really are underneath who they were taught to be. That is the short version. Okay, let's go. Okay, so quick foundation here for those who are new to the term fascia. Your fascia is your connective tissue that is essentially this web-like tissue that runs all throughout your body, from your head all the way down to your toes. It wraps around your muscles, your nerves, your organs. Every part of your body is covered by fascia, and it is deeply intertwined with your nervous system and with sensory receptors that communicate to your brain whether you are safe in your environment or not. And what's really cool about fascia is there's a lot of new research coming out in this realm of the body. It's been extremely understudied in the past, and that is changing. And we're starting to find that fascia actually has this kind of correlation or storage with emotional memory and trauma memory. Now, that doesn't mean that the physical tissues of your body store the actual cognitive memory of a bad thing that happened in your past, right? Like that memory is stored in the brain. But the fascia remembers the emotional experience of it. So when somebody tells you, for example, that your physical pain is stress related, or it's psychosomatic, or it's all in your head, that is their sort of misinformed way of saying that we can't explain physiologically why this pain is here. So we're just gonna say that there's no reason for it to be there, when the reason for it to be there is actually the stored emotional pattern. Emotional bracing, guarding, and armoring patterns are what are stored in our connective tissue. The fascia learns to brace against things that feel unsafe. So a quick example. Lately, I've noticed that when I'm walking downhill, the right side of my body has this funny tendency to walk on the tips of my toes rather than through the full expression of heel, arch, toe like you would normally take a step. Reason being is because I've had both a hip and knee injury on my right side in the past that I had to spend several years rehabbing, and there was a lot of pain on that side of my body that prevented me from being able to take steps downhill or downstairs without experiencing significant pain. That part of my body learned to brace against that pain, because taking the step without bracing was too painful. If the bracing was there, it communicated to my body, hey, take this a little bit slower so that you don't hurt yourself, so that you don't exacerbate the injury, so that you don't have to feel that pain again. The interesting thing is, though, the injury has healed. I no longer experience the pain in those joints, and yet my body still attempts that pattern of bracing every time it walks downhill, because it remembers that I had to brace there and guard there in the past against that pain. This is where things get really interesting, because this is where our body can be expressing symptoms of pain long after the moment of trauma or moments of conditioning for bracing have ended. So if we're talking about this in regards to good girl conditioning that many women inherit from existing in a patriarchal culture, we may find common patterns of bracing in our bodies. Patterns like tension and bracing in the neck and shoulders from carrying too many burdens, too much emotional overwhelm. Patterns of bracing or guarding in the hips or in the pelvic bowl from suppressed emotion or sexual violation. Patterns of bracing and guarding in the jaw or in the throat from not being able to speak your truth, having to grip back what you really wanted to say. We might have patterns of tension in the belly from early childhood fear, or patterns of guarding, bracing, and tension in the belly from having been a girl or young woman who grew up learning that you had to suck your belly in order to be attractive, in order to be good enough. And so again, your body by default still braces there, right? Braces against that fear of rejection. People who experienced a lot of shame early on in life might walk around with collapsed chest and shoulders and this sort of contracted forward posture in their body. People who experience a lot of repressed anger might unconsciously walk around clenching their fists without realizing it. Our body is always telling a story about what's going on beneath the surface, what it feels is safe and unsafe. And these patterns, while they can sometimes sound beautifully symbolic and poetic, they are actually quite literal and physiological. You are walking around in the world telling the story of, I'm not good enough and it's not okay for me to be here and take up space, or you're telling the story of, I feel good about myself. I'm confident in who I am. I believe I deserve to be here. I believe I deserve to be heard and to have a voice. And so while I want you to honestly begin to take a look at your unique lived experience, the moments in your history that taught your body what shapes were okay or not okay to take, the injuries or illnesses or experiences of trauma from your past that have shaped how your body moves throughout space. Those are so valuable to reflect upon because they'll show you where there's maybe a need for updated programming, right? If you're no longer living in the old experience, we have to teach our body that that's actually true. But I also want you to look at, especially if you are a woman, what the culture taught you. For example, maybe you learned that you had to cross your legs in order to be polite and ladylike, that you couldn't sit with wide open legs because that wasn't ladylike. Or maybe you learned to shrink yourself in public spaces to make yourself as small as possible in order to avoid potential harm or in order to be seen as agreeable. Maybe you learned to stifle your voice, that it wasn't okay for you to have an opinion, and again, to bite back those words. These are examples of embodied compliance, of women feeling unentitled to their own body taking up space in the world. And this sort of inherited conditioning is quite harmful to our bodies. And once we begin to examine it, we'll find all the ways that our body has been unconsciously, subtly bracing. And you've interpreted that bracing as just the way that your body is. Like you might just think you're tight in that area, or that's just how your body expresses itself. But it's really a reflection of the cultural conditioning. You might find, for example, that if you had that inherited conditioning of needing to cross your legs all the time, that you have really tight inner thighs, tight adductors. This was a big one for me, not only with that inherited conditioning of always needing to cross my legs, but also with a history and lived experience of sexual violation. I found that when I really started to listen to my body, there was near constant bracing in my adductor, inner thighs, and groin muscles. Even when I was fully relaxed on the couch at rest, if I took a moment to tune in to what was going on in my body, my thighs were still squeezing together. No matter how relaxed I was, those muscles and that connective tissue, that fascia, was still bracing. So it took a lot of intentional work, not just stretching, but actual deconditioning of the programming to teach my body that it was safe to soften, that I did not have to brace and guard all the time. And why I think this conversation is so important and hopefully really valuable for you is maybe you've tried everything else for your physical symptoms. Maybe you've done the PT and the chiropractor and the massage, and you've done all the stretching and the yoga. You've done everything you can possibly do, and you're still experiencing patterns of chronic pain in your body. It is absolutely important to explore any avenues of support that we can. Like, all those tools and modalities are wonderful tools and modalities. Bodywork is a beautiful tool. I practice yoga almost every day. I love physical therapy. These are all things that have contributed to me understanding my body better. And they were incomplete components of the equation before I added in this layer of understanding the inherited trauma and lived experience that was expressing itself through my body. And so hopefully it is validating for you to understand that nothing has worked, not because there's something inherently broken about you or wrong with you. You've just been working with an incomplete equation. And in order to experience new patterns in the body, your body has to learn that it is actually safe for it to exist and take up space and express now in ways that maybe it didn't feel safe to do so in the past. And that happens through repeated somatic experience, not just through cognitive understanding, but through actually getting into your body to whatever degree you're able to at a pace that feels safe and available for you, given your own history and lived experience, and to slowly learn to make contact with those parts of you again, with those emotions, with the parts that learn to brace and to understand how they've been trying to protect you, and offer them an alternative, offer them the option to let go of that pattern of bracing. Because retraining your nervous system isn't just about relaxation and softening and forcing your body into a release. It's about giving your body the capacity to express whatever it needs to express so that it feels safe to relax when it's time to relax. And that is the messy and complicated work of learning to be with and witness your own emotions again, learning to let your sense of self take up more space, your body take up more space, be more expressed in your life, and to learn experience by experience that maybe that is actually safe and okay again, and to no longer participate in your own diminishment and self-silencing as a woman. Because a woman who has built this experience of somatic safety, or at least has more access to it, is able to drop her shoulders, is able to soften her belly, is able to loosen her jaw, is able to experience that ease and flow of being in the body, and then going into activation when we need that. Right? We have the flexibility to dip into either state, whatever state. We're essentially expanding our capacity and our range of expression. That's really the work that I do, is help you understand how to expand your capacity to feel more, to be with more of life, more of the wanted experiences and more of the challenging ones too, to be with those without letting them totally dysregulate us or lose our sense of self. Having more range of emotional expression in life. Again, the joy, the rage, the grief, all of it. When you do that, you're essentially reclaiming what was taken from you when you were taught you had to be a good girl in order to belong. You're giving yourself access to more aliveness. That is the work, not just perpetual healing and playing whack-a-mole with symptoms and trying to fix one thing after the other, but actually letting your healing translate into more aliveness. That is what I want for you. That is what I teach. So if that's what you're down for, I'm so glad you're here. Make sure that you subscribe so that you can follow along for all future videos to support you in this process of deconditioning and retraining your nervous system and creating more capacity for aliveness in your life. And I would love to hear what part of this video really landed and hit home most for you. So share that in the comments below. Share the video with a friend who could also use these reminders to understand how her body has stored the expression of these narratives and stories that we've inherited oftentimes from generations before us. The more we're all having this conversation together, the more it becomes normalized for us to come back into our own power. And if you're curious to learn more about how to actually practice this embodiment and feminine range work, I'll link a couple of different options in the notes below. So you can check out, first of all, my homecoming protocol. It's a 7-day audio guide for building inner authority, self-trust, and aliveness. 7 very simple 10 to 15 minute audios that you can listen to each day to rebuild that relationship. If you want to do weekly live practices with me, I offer guided somatic practice in my embodiment membership, the self-care space. It's also linked below. And if you're curious to work more in depth with me one-on-one or in my small women's groups, I will link my offerings below as well. So again, make sure you subscribe if this is landing with you, and I cannot wait to see you in the next video.